Hi, everybody, and welcome to the K-8 pathway. I'm Sarah, and on behalf of the Patent CSinPA crew, we are so glad that you're joining us. This little slide you'll see a lot in some of our activities. It's kind of the intro. It gives us what to expect coming up. So our activity coming up is setting the stage. It's about 30 minutes. We'll talk more about that hat, that champion hat, in just a few moments, as well as that goal. But basically, so that we have a solid foundation moving forward in the pathway, we're going to spend a little bit of time to get started discussing what computer science is and why it's so important in Pennsylvania and just everywhere. That hat, that champion hat, which we'll talk more about, will help us kind of get into the swing of things with the pathway. So I've said it once before, but I want to say it again. Thank you so much for embarking on your own personal computer science journey. You are now one of over 1,000 educators across Pennsylvania to participate in this pathway. The pathway has been iteratively designed over the past few years. We've made some tweaks and changes, hopefully each time improving it for improving the experience for folks like you. But you'll notice that I highlighted a few key things there from the start to when we welcomed aboard our intermediate unit partners and facilitators. Hello, IUs, thank you, to really engage cohorts of educators locally. So again, we're so glad that you're here. We're so glad that you get to connect with your IUs for this pathway. We want to share a few things about what hasn't changed over the past few years of the pathway. Since the very start, we have stayed tried and true to the same vision, mission, and goals for the pathway. This vision of equitable access to computer science learning for Pennsylvania students remains our focus. To get there, we know that we need to support you, the educators, and make sure that you feel comfortable and confident in bringing awesome computer science learning to your students. We've also not changed our goals since day one. So here's what we set out to do with the pathway to help you expand computer science learning at your school, and big picture, so that we can work together to make CS learning accessible and equitable across Pennsylvania. Throughout the pathway, we will refer back to these goals. If you can remember in your mind what goal was on the very first slide that I showed, it was pathway goal number 5. So moving on a little bit, I've mentioned it before, you're joining more than 1,000 participants in this pathway. We hope that you'll enjoy connecting and collaborating with other educators whose experiences and roles and settings might be similar or very different from your own. We like to share this just to reassure you that you are most definitely welcome here and you have something to give and hopefully a lot to learn from your fellow participants too. As you engage through this pathway, you'll hear us talk about growing your capacity in these 3 perspectives or roles, or we like to joke and call them hats too. You might even hear us say, for this activity, we're going to wear our CS champion hat, like I said at the beginning of this recording. These roles or hats also align to the work that we're doing in pursuit of those goals or objectives for the pathway. So you'll see these symbols again, you'll hear from us and your facilitators, gives us a way to frame an activity and dig into it. We call the K-8 CSinPA pathway a journey, and we really do mean it. Altogether, you'll engage in 48 hours of learning, but don't feel overwhelmed. That is all broken down into 8 modules, and your facilitators will be able to share more information with you about what to expect, whether it's virtual or in person, that you'll be doing specific activities or working in those modules. But again, we're so glad that you're here. Whatever structure you find yourself in, wherever you are in Pennsylvania, thank you for joining us on our pathway. let's define computer science. Reminder that this is pathway goal number 5. We are wearing our champion hats, as I already mentioned. So you can think about what types of thinking you are doing. And here we go. So to get us started, I want to keep things, the segue into this pretty light and easy. And instead of just jumping right into the Webster's Dictionary says CS is, think about computer science in your own life. And if that's a little difficult, maybe just think about computing or technology. So how is computing part of your life? If you have access to the visual on the slides, there's a hand with all these icons. Like I see a telephone, I see maybe a washer or a dryer, a video game console. So in your life, you can write this down on a scratch paper, or maybe just keep a running list in your brain. Consider all of the ways that computing or technology is involved or is a part of your daily life or impacts it. You can take a few moments to think through that. You can pause here, and then when you're ready, restart our video and we'll discuss our ideas together. Well, I'll discuss ideas, but I promise I'm listening to you wherever you are. So here we go. Ways that computing is a part of our life or technology. We've had these conversations a lot on our team, and it's always funny to kind of see who, I don't know, is it like categories? Is that the game? Where you just keep trying to list things, and we could go on and on and on for hours. I don't want to use all of your time today in this module, but it is interesting to note how all of the different ways that maybe you don't even think about, but you're just so used to it. And maybe it's the case that we take it for granted. We don't really realize it until maybe it's broken or we don't have access to it. But as you can see, and I'm sure as you thought about, computing and technology really is all over the place as far as our individual personal day-to-day lives, but as, big picture as a society too. So we start with this because we like to have like a mental picture, and we like to think about like, okay, computer science is not so far out of reach for all of us, right? But let's make that leap or that transition now. So we're thinking about ways that we use technology and computing, but now let's kind of make that leap of faith into figuring out and discussing what computer science is. So what is it? Well, we have one definition that we kind of rely on the most, and this definition is cited by the K-12 CS framework and the CSTA CS standards that our state has endorsed. So it is kind of our blanket definition. Computer science is a broad term. If you're looking there and you're reading it, you're like, oh, okay, there's one comma and then another and then another. So it kind of goes on and on, right? But even though this definition is a little wordy, I like it because it does showcase the fact that computer science is so much more than maybe what we think about with coding and programming. Not to say that it doesn't involve that or that those aren't important, but it's not the only thing. We'll be digging into more of big picture, what's all involved in computer science in Module B, but here's a kind of an at a glance version of that. CS studies computers, how they work, how to give them instructions and have them do stuff, how to make them better, how to use them, and how their use affects us as a whole society. That's a lot, right? But it goes to show that it's more than just programming. It is super engaging and fun and important in not only in our K-12 schools, but in our communities. So, all right, we know what computer science is. Done, check it off the list. Well, we think it's also important to kind of give a little, maybe twofold here, what it is and what it is not. So we can think about, again, computer science as studying computers, how they work, how to use them. But when we think about what is not computer science, there's a pretty long list of what that is too. it's interesting to think about what computer science is not, because it gets a little touchy and tricky in education world. It's worth noting, right, that if we stop and think about it, this is the first time in like 100 years that we've introduced a whole new content area or area of study in K-12 education. It's easy to to build schema around math education, or definitely literacy, or social studies, or science. They evolve over time, but feels like they've been around for forever. Not the case with computer science. So sometimes it's hard to put into words what computer science is without kind of falling into some of these gray non-areas. So let's just kind of call them for what they are. Being good with technology, not computer science. You can be really, really good with technology and never really engage in computer science. Maybe you're that person in your family or in your building who always gets called when a certain device or an app doesn't work the way people want it to. We need people like that, right? That can troubleshoot and kind of maybe magically walk near a printer and then all of a sudden it works again. But that's not on its own computer science. Neither is being proficient with specific applications or devices. We're not here to argue the importance or merit of insert app here or skill like typing or word processing. We're not here to argue any of that. We just want to make sure that when we're talking about computer science education, we're talking about computer science and not some of these other skills or characteristics about using technology. And again, it can be really hard. It's made even harder by the fact that in education generally, we have so many buzzwords and so many vocabulary words for what it is we do. We have a one-page document in the Schoology course for Module A that's called What is CS? And it compares and contrasts computer science with a lot of these buzzwords, including a few of these. It's important, though, that we think of computer science as building on, but not equal to or the same as some of these things, or well, honestly, all of these things, right? So these are all about using technology, but not necessarily understanding how or why it works, and not always creating with technology. It's very easy to confuse that, and especially when we're thinking about our students' abilities, right? A student can be very skilled in using technology, maybe creating a cool website with a drag and drop Wix or Weebly, or maybe they're recording themselves on their iPad, but that doesn't mean that they understand how it works and why it works. When we get to that, that's really what we're talking about computer science. All right. I'm going to throw one more buzzword at you. I'm sorry. I promise it's the last one, but it is one that we will revisit in Module B to some extent. So it's worth kind of maybe giving you a preview, a sneak peek of it now. And that's that other word where it says computer science involves. So computer science may build on those kind of other buzzwords, but it involves computational thinking. And I have to be honest, this has been kind of, it's taken me a lot of tries to work out in my head the way that I talk about computational thinking, and I'm still learning and growing too. So really looking forward to revisiting this in Module B with you. But when we think about computational thinking, the key word there is thinking. So it's all about thinking and problem solving. For us as educators, it's about us modeling and supporting students in, well, just being thoughtful and intentional about the work that they're doing and how they're doing it with those lenses that you see there, those key concepts of decomposition and abstractions. Those are obviously like important things, and they are critical to computer science. But when we're thinking about computational thinking, that's that key word, is thinking. How do we think about something? How do we go about figuring it out and solving it? So again, I'm sorry to keep throwing words at you. Check out the What is CS page on Schoology, and definitely stay tuned for Module B when we dig more into computational thinking. So we've kind of, it's been a whirlwind, right? Like blasted through all of this the last few minutes. And as I mentioned, it's going to take some time maybe to really develop your confidence in off the cuff speaking of computer science. But we'd like for you to try that right now, like kind of see in your mind's eye, like, okay, what is computer science? That's your task for this module or for this activity of module A. So we'd like for you to be thoughtful. If you were asked, or maybe you, I don't know, had the opportunity to tell a colleague or a family member about your engagement in this pathway, and they're like, well, oh, what does that mean? You're doing computer science? You just playing with robots all day? Think about how you describe to them or explain what computer science is. Now, this should be kind of a working definition, definitely not something polished, but it's a good practice to just get started in being thoughtful about the words that you would use. We ask that you capture your thinking in your module reflection doc. That way, if there are others on your team, you can kind of crowdsource and compare definitions, but also that we capture that, and later on, maybe in another module, we come back and revisit your personal definition. If you'd like to see some of the definitions or the vocabulary that I mentioned in this activity, as I already said, there is a one-pager in Schoology as well as some other information. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you for another activity in Module A.